This is part 7 of scheme design. What we're going to do in this session is explore 4 models of evaluation, which I have made use of on several occasions in different organisations. And we'll think about the pros and cons of these 4. The first one is the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation, probably the best known. There's also the CIRO method of evaluation. There is also this relatively new technique called realist evaluation. And then there is one which is used quite a lot in coaching evaluation, which is return on investment. And we will take a critical look at these different methods of evaluation. So first, the Kirkpatrick. So the Kirkpatrick model has 4 different levels. First of all, there's the initial reaction that the participants had to the training, to the coaching, to the mentoring, whatever it is they happen to be involved in. And many people refer to these as the happy sheet evaluation. So people have engaged in the event, in the training, had some mentoring, had some coaching. What do you think about it? And they respond on a piece of paper with some comments about it. What did you like? What didn't you like? What went well? What didn't go so well? And so on. So immediate reactions. Then another level of thinking about the Kirkpatrick model is to have a look at the learning that's gone on. Have the participants increased their capability or knowledge as a result of the training or of the coaching or of the mentoring? Now, this is quite a difficult thing to evaluate. I mean, how would you know? And you might have to gather third-party feedback or look at performance data or whatever to try to assess that, as well as interview people. Then you have the third level, which is behavior. So has the coaching or the mentoring or the training had any effect on the participants' behavior? And you will need to have some third-party validation of that. And finally, over the longer period of time, it's what's the ultimate impact, the results, what's the ultimate impact of this training, this mentoring, this coaching, and how has that impacted on wider business results or the wider environment? Now, this can be quite challenging again, because it's very difficult to draw a straight line between coaching and mentoring or training interventions and the bottom line results, which is what a lot of organizations obviously want to do. But in evaluation terms, it's not always as straightforward as that. The other thing about the Kirkpatrick framework is that it's relatively time consuming and is done over a long period of time. It's detailed, it can be expensive, and it tries to look at change and impact over a period of time. And sometimes people who use the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation kind of run out of steam with it because it needs to happen over about a year. So let's look at the CIRO model. This, again, has 4 levels. The first one is context. It involves gathering data about the context and the development intervention, in this case coaching and mentoring, or perhaps the training of the coaches or the mentors. And it looks at the identification of needs and how far they have been met within that particular context. It also looks at the input, what has gone on in terms of the intervention. In this case, it would be coaching or mentoring. Let's look at the input of coaching and mentoring. What does that have had? What effect has that had on the participants? How have the participants reacted? The R of the CIRO model. Using the reaction, so this is the happy sheet as well, if you like. And then we have the outcomes, which is looking for the results. And again, rather like the Kirkpatrick model, this may need to happen over a period of time. So the advantages of the CIRO model is that it's detailed and it attempts to measure change and impact over time, rather like the Kirkpatrick model does. But like the Kirkpatrick model, it's expensive and it can take a long time to do. And again, people can run out of steam. So realist evaluation is quite different. It is basically about testing or establishing and testing the theory of the coaching or the mentoring scheme. So, for example, the theory of the mentoring scheme might be that it accelerates people's learning and development, or that coaching improves performance. That would be a theory that is put forward. This is why we might do this in this organisation. It's to do with the purpose of coaching or mentoring scheme. So it's important to be clear about what that theory is. We are introducing mentoring in order to. We are introducing coaching in order to. And it asks a question not does it work, which is what Kirkpatrick and Zero tend to do, but it asks for how does this work, who does it work for, and in what contexts? And that's quite a different set of questions. So what's important is to identify these theories and be clear about how they work. It also is important that to recognize that change comes from the ideas that people have, the individuals, the institution, and the infrastructure that is in place in the organization. So ask, what's the theory of the program? And once we've established that, we start thinking about three levels. First of all, the context. The context fires the mechanism. So the environment in which this thing happens enables the mechanisms that are used to work. So what are the rules? What are the opportunities? What's the culture like? What is enabling coaching, for example? What is inhibiting coaching within this context? We've talked about that previously when we were talking about scheme design. So the mechanisms are about the capacities and choices, the logic that's used in order to implement the intervention of coaching and mentoring within the contexts. So what are people saying about coaching, and what resources have been committed, and how are people being matched, and what training are they getting? And then we think about the outcomes. So the impact, the outputs, short-term and medium-term, longer term, and they include intended outcomes as well as the ones that aren't intended. So there's multiple levels of outcomes that might be there. And can you say at the end of exploring the context, the mechanisms, and the outcomes, coaching improves performance in this context with these measurements? That would be the conclusion of the realist evaluation. Now, also important to remember with realist evaluation is because programs work differently in different contexts and through different change mechanisms, program cannot simply be replicated from one context to the other. So we can't just take a coaching scheme off the shelf and say it'll work here, because the realist evaluation says that we have to be clear about the theory, about the context, about the mechanism, and the outcomes are mitigated by the context and by the mechanisms. So a realist evaluation gives good understandings about what works for who, in what contexts and how, but are they portable? Now, the advantage is that it's detailed and it attempts to measure the change and impact over time. It takes a long time to do realist evaluation, but it offers an answer to the questions, does the theory work and how does it work? And this gives it certain advantages above other methods of evaluation. Return on investment evaluation. And I'll say right now, I am not keen on this at all. So the logic of return on investment is coaching conversations translate into doing. Doing translates into performance impact, and impact can be quantified and maximized. That's the logic of return on investment. And the benefits that are coming from this evaluation are both tangible and intangible. Now, one of the things that might happen in terms of creating a return on investment calculation is, first of all, look at the costs. So taking into account, let's say, the training costs of coaches and mentors, the time in training, to take that into account, management of the initiative, how much time does that take, time in coaching sessions for coaches, time in coaching sessions for coaches, the coaching meetings, the discussions, and so on. So all that needs to be taken into account in a return on investment. So you could say, and this is one which comes from an example that was done in the States, that the total cost of developing coaching within an organization is $107,625.76. So the return on investment calculation would then look at the positive cash flow. So this is the increase in revenue which has been estimated comes from the coaching intervention times the percentage confidence they have in that estimation and how much the percentage is attributable to the coaching and mentoring intervention, and the time savings get put into that as well as a costed activities, the hours saved per week times the weeks since coaching completed times the hourly rate, and again the percentage confidence they have in those figures and the percentage that's attributable to coaching, and it will give you a total return of $4,224,309.27, and the calculation comes out as a return on investment of 39 to 1. Believe that if you will. The basic problem with return on investment calculations as calculated like this is that everything in terms of the return on investment and the times and the costs that are there are based on subjective estimates, and subjective estimates by the coaches, by the coachees. So they have a vested interest in trying to make it look good. And I just wonder whether that's appropriate. I've already said, I don't think it is.